Now, Greg, I wanted to ask you about one of the main pieces that we have in the room. Obviously, well, tell us what we're looking at. I've heard it's the Dandnongs painting.
Yes, well, Jan knows exactly where and whom and when it was painted, so she can perhaps answer that better than I can. So, Jan, how did the League acquire that painting? And who's it by and where's it of?
It was painted by a lady by the name of Dorothy Binney, and I believe in 1929 she lived in South Perth. Her nephew went on the 1929 tour. When he got to America, he took ill. And shortly after that, they got to America. They were going off to Canada. They had a doctor that was looking after him, said that I'll look after him until he's well, and I'll bring him up to Canada, which he did. And on the way back home again on the boat, he took ill again. What was wrong was never stated, but she painted that in appreciation for the way that he'd been looked after. And I know that they came from a very rich family that lived out Welshpool Way at that particular time. And this boy had been brought up at Guildford Grammar, so they came from a well-to-do family.
Now, Greg, you have a story associated with your involvement.
Yes.
Tell us what that is.
Well, Jan asked me to come in and have a look at the picture because it had been hanging above the fireplace there for many years and in other places as well in the League. And at that time, the painting was very, very dark. So dark that you could not see the figures standing there in the picture.
Really?
Yes, and the sky is blue at the moment, but at that time it was so covered in soot and ash and dirt from years of storage above the fireplace that that sky was a fawn colour, quite yellow. There was none of the greens were showing up as green or anything like that. It had a tear in it. The painting itself is about 2 metres by 2.25 metres long. If you include the frame, it's quite a large picture, and it's oil on canvas. Anyway, it had a big tear in the canvas. It had slipped in its frame. Someone had done some restoration work on the frame. A good job as far as it went, but not to museum standards. And various repairs had been attempted over the years on the canvas itself. Many of those repairs were the repairs were decades old, and probably somebody throwing a ball or something like that, or a piece of furniture being moved, or the painter's ladder slipped or something had just gone rip. So what I did was called in one of the best conservators around in Perth on oil paintings. There are 2 or 3 very good ones, and Del Smith is one of them. He's from South Africa originally. He was head of conservation department of the Durban Art Gallery for many years. Anyway, I showed the painting to him and he came in and we did the job together. Del did most of the work, and we took the picture out of its frame. We took the frame down from the wall. We had to get special scaffolding in just to move it. The floor is uneven, so we had to build up the floor in order to put the scaffolding up there in order to be able to get up there safely and lift it. Just the frame itself, to give you an idea, that frame is made from pine, and it's covered over with gesso and some stuff called compo, which is composition, and it's like plaster. And so the compo finish on that frame is very, very thick. So 2 men can just lift the frame, and that's all, and it's hard to do. So you really need 4 blokes to lift that frame, just the frame on its own. The painting doesn't weigh much, but it was quite flimsy. The stretcher that it was on, which is the canvas is stretched around a wooden frame, was in reasonable condition but had never been maintained. So it was a bit twisted and warped, and the painting was flapping around in the breeze, so every time someone opened the door, the whole painting would go boom, boom, and flap in and out. Anyway, we took it out, and Del took it up to his studio and worked on it for many months. And the first thing he had to do was re-stretch it. So he repaired the stretcher frame, reapplied some of the tacks holding this canvas to the stretcher, and then retensioned that so that it was firm and stiff enough to be worked on. So that's the first thing we did. Second thing was to look at various areas on the painting where some repairs had been done. One of the three-corner tears that we just talked about, which is, with a tear the size of an A4 piece of paper, on two sides. So it was quite a big tear. And someone in their wisdom had got a piece of 6-ply, an old bit of a packing case, and glued it to the back of the canvas to try and hold the whole thing together. Of course, the tear had been split open, so there was a big gap of about 20 millimetres, and so they filled that up with some plaster stuff and bopped over the top of it with various house paints to try and cover up the tear. You can still see where the tear was. If you see the log there in the foreground, about halfway along the log there's a branch sticking up. Well, if you go directly down from that branch, and you can see a sort of a black stumpy looking thing between the log and the bottom sight edge of the frame, that's where the tear was. So Dell had to remove the old repair, which had been put on with a permanent glue, so a bit like Araldite, as we call the goddess of conservation, Araldite, or PVA glue. It was a relatively modern glue, but a very permanent glue, which had yellowed and gone brittle. Fortunately, he was able to save the pieces of canvas that remained and get rid of the patch. There were a few other patches in a couple of other places as well. So all of those were retensioned and pulled back together as much as possible and then repaired properly. Once again to museum standards. So another piece of canvas was laid up on the back. After that, the whole painting was cleaned, and you're talking about some of the stain that came off the painting when it comes off in the solvent is the colour of Coca-Cola when it comes off. It's that dark. Or black tea. And that's taken off a layer at a time until you get down to the varnish layer, which was painted over the top of the painting. Usually oil paintings like that, after about a year they varnish them to protect them. The varnish layer was removed as well because that yellows and goes brown with age too, and bingo, out come all the beautiful colours of the painting. After that, Dell filled and textured any of the holes that remained so that it mimicked the look of the brush strokes. After that, he revarnished with a museum grade clear varnish over the whole surface. Then over that varnish, retouched the missing colours and parts of the image, and then varnished it again. Now, the idea behind that is that those two varnishes at any time in the future can be removed easily, as opposed to the old varnish, which was very hard to get off. The new one can come off. A conservator needs to do it, but it can come off very easily without damage to the underlying paint. So his retouching can be discarded, and you get back to as much of the painting as possible that's been
it's a marvellous job.
Protected. Yeah.
Done a marvellous job.
So then we put it back in the frame, but before we did that, the frame had been re-gilded with what's called Schlagmetal. It's not real gold, and it's a bronze-style alloy that, in time, with oxygen and with moisture from the air, tarnishes. And you might see that on a lot of the other fake gold frames around the place. You get all these little black spots.
You mean in time that will go down to a...
Correct. So to slow that, what should have been done, the original frame would have been water gilded by hand, beautifully. And the gold leaf's probably still under there. But they've bopped it over the top with some more adhesive and then put the new gold leaf straight over the top, or the new fake gold leaf over the top. Now, it is possible to get down to the original gold leaf if funds were available, but it's a major, major job just to conserve the frame. And as money had already been spent on that, you don't redo it. So what we did was we cleaned the Schlagmetal that was there and gave it a couple of really good thorough coats of microcrystalline wax. And that microcrystalline wax protects the Schlagmetal from the atmosphere, so that process of deterioration will take a lot longer than it otherwise would have. You could expect to see bad tarnishing on that within 10 to 20 years of it first being applied, but with the slag metal you might double that time.
Good.
So then we re-strengthened a few areas, improved the hanging system, and then with great muscle power got it back up on the wall again with the aid of a few other